Hej allihopa! Då var det dags för ett webbinar igen. Det är fredag, jättehärligt. För 2 dagar sedan hade vi ett säljwebbinar med Printix som jag tror att flera av er var inne på. Idag kommer vi köra mer fokus på det tekniska. Och har ni några frågor så kan ni ställa dem till höger i antingen questions, då är ni anonyma, då är det bara vi som ser att ni ställer frågorna, eller i chatten så kan alla se frågorna. Och sen så försöker vi samla upp dem och svara på dem på slutet. För en del av er har inte ljud tillgängligt så att ni kan prata med oss, så ni får snällt skriva frågorna där. Sen kan ni alltid kontakta mig eller mina kollegor på Alltså. Det går jättebra. Så med det sagt, Damien, I will leave the stage to you.
Thank you so much. Hello, good morning and welcome. My name is Damien Roberts. I take care of the professional services and technical onboardings within Printix. I've been with the company for close to 6 years now and been in this industry for a lot longer. So I'm really happy to present to you our solution from a technical standpoint. And what I tend to do is I will kick off with a PowerPoint presentation. I'm sorry, but it's only a very few slides. And I think it is beneficial just to get that high level overview in the concept of how this thing works. So you should see my screen now.
Yes, we see it.
Great. So with Printix, well, first of all, the question mostly comes up like, what is it? What does it do? First of all, of course, Printix is, come on, PowerPoint, do it. Why is it not working? Sorry about this. Should actually, there we go. Sorry about that. So Printix is software as a service for print management. And one of the big drivers in the adoption of the service is not only the simplicity. So essentially the solution is a result out of the learnings out of the development team that have been doing this for 2 decades. And so the idea was simplicity first. We don't want to bog anyone down with having to add even more servers to your print servers, etc. So the idea is to get rid of print servers and manage this out of the cloud. And one of the main drivers with this has been the tight integration into ID providers like Azure AD, G Suite, Google Workspace, Office 365, so Google and Microsoft work accounts as a broader term. We are Microsoft's preferred solution. We've been on the Azure Marketplace for years now. And this is really streamlining the adoption of the solution and giving customers the capability to transition across their print infrastructure and print environment once they intend to or they have gone cloud. Because as you all might know, when you do that and you take your file server and put it onto SharePoint and get your Office 365 and put your local AD into Azure AD and all those great things, there tends to be a little bit of a gap that appears around managing print. So we're here to close that, and we've been doing that for the past 6 years successfully. So all of that said, we do see ourselves as a part of that puzzle in going cloud, and essentially what you get is serverless infrastructure. So the real beauty behind this one bullet alone is it's not just ending up with a serverless infrastructure, but also migrating across what you have today in a very seamless fashion. And once you've done that, or you've come through a greenfield scenario or a combination of existing print server, shared queue-based setup, plus manually installed queues in satellite offices, like all these different scenarios. Once you've migrated across, you get that option to then even add more functionality on top of just taking care of printer queues, printer drivers, queue names, making printer queues appear automatically based on where you sign in, based on your Azure groups, your Google groups. So all of these automations really take away the effort needed to manage print. And we all know one of the most tickets around the world right after I forgot my password is I can't print. So we're here to demolish that ticket. With that said, what we do is we try and not reinvent the wheel with everything we do. We try and put together well-known and proven technologies with track history intelligently and manage all this out of the cloud centrally. So I'll get into the architecture of the solution, and I'm actually going to show you hands-on what the solution looks like and how you administer it and how you migrate a print server across, for instance, just as a teaser. But essentially you get a web-based dashboard, a web administrator from which you can manipulate any kind of printer queue, drivers, presets. You can deploy it to specific computers. You can automate the deployment, etc., etc. We'll get into a little more detail in the hands-on piece during this demo. With that, we also gain a lot more insights. So we have developed in cooperation with one of our Microsoft partners out of Scandinavia, a Power BI driven report. So what we do is we also get the information from your print fleet. We are completely vendor agnostic. So we work with any printer out there, with almost any printer driver, which means you can get a combined view and insights into how is your fleet being utilized, who's printing what, how much, when, to which printer queue, etc., etc. And the real beauty of that is you can completely customize that report. We basically write that information into a database. That data is yours or your customers. And you can pull that database either using the predefined Power BI template, or if you like, you can go straight to it with Crystal reports, etc., etc. Whatever is your preference, the data is there for you to, dig down and basically just help your customer become more efficient. The automation part on the solution is, I guess, one of the core components. So we can very easily set a basic rule set so that printer queues will simply appear by me signing into a specific location. So if I'm down in Berlin, I get the printers for Berlin. If I'm down in Copenhagen, I get the ones for Copenhagen installed. And all of this happens automatically. No one actually has to proactively do anything. Okay. Then again, we have the integration with these authentication providers. We also now provide integration with Okta and OneLogin on top. So if you have customers running that, yes, you can seamlessly integrate with this. The architecture itself, Printix is a public cloud multi-tenant setup. So we host on Microsoft out of Amsterdam. And essentially, each customer gets their own encapsulated Printix tenant, just like with any other cloud service. You have your tenant to go to, and that's where all the configuration lives. That's where you go to administer and manipulate any kind of configuration. We have put these authentication and the cloud storage bubble outside of the Printix bubble, just to indicate that when you integrate or your customer integrates with Azure AD, Google Workspaces, Okta, etc., we don't actually do the authentication. We leverage OAuth 2 to do that authentication of the user. The domain situation of the computers in question, where we have deployed Printix Client to, which is our agent software, which is required, so we can actually, have printer queues installed on operating system level, etc. We basically don't care too much about the domain situation of these computers. So you can span the Printix ecosystem across workgroup machines, across Windows, Macintosh, domain joined, Azure domain joined. It doesn't really matter. There are some asterisks around what the difference might be between a local AD and an Azure AD joined machine in terms of single sign-on. But I mean, these are details we can get into in the Q&A if this is pressing matters. But the main message here is you can essentially tie in all computers, and that is Macintosh, Windows, and even Chrome OS through the Chrome extension into this management ecosystem of Printix. And essentially, if we decide to have this printer, for instance, enroll on this device, the real nice thing is when that user hits print, they get their usual driver, the Xerox, the HP, the Lexmark driver, whatever your preference is or your customer's preference. And when they print, that document goes straight from the computer within your local area network to the printer. So essentially, in one sentence, what we do is we orchestrate local direct IP print through the cloud. And I'll show you what that really means hands-on. So once we are managing queues, we have discovered these printers, we have printer queues, we have drivers, we have queue names, we have some kind of preference if need be. We can then even extend functionality and say, all right, now let's talk about secure printing, mobile printing, follow me printing, for the lack of a better term. We call it Printix Anywhere. We have Cloud Print API, so you can have automated ERP systems that basically batch print to Printix managed printers without the need of having Printix client installed on that ERP server. So there's a whole raft of options and functionality when you get into Printix. Things like Citrix, RDS, AVD, you name them, all these remote desktop scenarios we can also cater for. We can mitigate the need for VPNs because we can actually transfer the documents through a cloud storage. And again, we've put it outside here to indicate that you can even define a custom storage, and that is a Google Cloud Storage or an Azure Blob Storage of your choice that lives within your or your customer's Azure tenancy or Google tenancy. So you have full control over where those documents, the actual payload, travels through the cloud, which of course gives us a lot of relief in terms of security and data privacy questions. Okay, so all of this, I don't want to go too long on the PowerPoint. All of this, at the end of the day, gives you modern printing, as we call it. So let's imagine we've defined all of these printers to auto-deploy and auto-remove. I can show you what that actually means in terms of clicks. I guess it's like a handful of clicks and you've done it. You can basically then hit the Amsterdam office with your laptop, for instance, sign into the Amsterdam site. Printix client on that computer will realize, okay, this is Amsterdam. Okay, there's printers, auto deploy. All right, let's do it. So I get these printer queues installed. By the time I open my Excel, Outlook, whatever it might be, my application, and I hit Control P, those queues are there. I can print to it. I'm printing local to the printer. It's not going through the cloud. It is local direct IP printing, basically through our service, which then leverages port 9100, 515 on LPR, IPP, IPPS if you want to, if the devices support certificates. So again, there's a whole raft of different possibilities here. And it always depends on the customer environment. So the real neat thing is, once I move away from that site and I hop over to the Berlin office, the Amsterdam queues disappear and I get the ones for Berlin, and so on and so forth. I'm sure you get the picture. We can even take it a level further by synchronizing Azure or Google Groups. And then we can say, all right, this machine here, or that one, whichever, is the sales department printer. We can associate the sales group to that printer, which means you will only have this printer queue installed if you happen to be part of the sales team based on your group membership in Azure or Google. So these are the sort of things that really help customers automate their print infrastructure and print environment and make it highly dynamic, which of course also means if you onboard a new employee, you set that person up in Azure or Google, and you deploy Printix Client through Endpoint Manager or the Google admin. Printix Client will single sign on. It will read that blueprint. We have initially defined there are different sites. There are different resources in these sites. I want these to behave in a certain way. That's all you really need to do. So no one has to go out and find printers, etc. They can. We can also have self-service component. That's there as well. But the idea is no one has to touch print. Everyone can just print straight to the device that is most meaningful to them based on where they are and the role in the business. Okay, so this is like a logical break here. I would like to give you the opportunity to ask a question or two right now. I don't actually have the chat here. I'm not sure if there are any questions. Otherwise, I would
no questions yet. But I will collect them all at the end and give them to you. Yeah.
Great. So all of that said, you would get your hands on a Printix tenant, for the lack of a better term, through the ACMP. You can run up the tenancy there on behalf of your customer. We will ask for the ID provider. So if you define an Azure domain or a Google Workspace domain right there, what's going to happen is by the time you actually sign into the tenant, you get an email with the sign-in details. You will end up in this dashboard. And I have, just to show you like the administration side of things, I have got the web administrator here on the left-hand side. And to show you what happens on the OS side, on the client side, these are my Windows printers and scanners. I've sort of done a bit of a split screen situation here. So on the left-hand side, just to be clear, this is admin only territory. No end user gets to go here or needs to go here. This is us in the administration only, where we define, okay, discover printers now, define a network, set up printer queues, change drivers, rename queue names, automate the deployment, all these things. This happens in the web administrator in the so-called Printix admin. On the right-hand side, you will see the result of when I change the configuration, and you will see that responsiveness. For this to work, there's some real core basics that we need to take care of. First of all, we need the tenant. Okay, we got this. This one is called Printix 20. Second of all, for anything to happen on OS level, we need to have the agent installed. Otherwise, we can't just call out into the internet and then expect some computers to magically install printer queues. We need to have the agent installed, which I already have. It's right down there. The agent, the Printix client, so-called, brings also the Printix service. So the Printix service runs in system context, and it is, the star behind the scenes. It is doing all the heavy lifting of installing the printer queue, downloading the driver if need be, all of these things. By me simply coming into the UI here and clicking some boxes, it's basically the service that then kicks into life and starts, executing on OS level on all the computers, excuse me, on all the computers it concerns. So if I define something on a specific site, it will only have impact to all the computers running Printix client in that site. So what I'd really like to point out is we have, of course, these icons. This is your dashboard. It shows you basic activity. This is not the reporting component. The reporting component is done through analytics and Power BI. I'll show you a demo report in a second soon. But what I would like to point out is we have these icons up top. So we can define sites, which means you can organize your customer's print infrastructure in a folder structure, in a tree structure, for the lack of a better term. So you can create folders and sites and then associate networks. Printix works in networks, meaning the different VLANs, the different subnets per site, or that subnet, if it's a smaller environment, you basically only have that one subnet or maybe two, a client and the printer subnet. You can basically put these together as logical networks, however you like, in Printix, and that's super important to get that right. And once you've done this, you can essentially associate the different, I need to discover some printers, that's why this is empty. You can basically organize it in this way, and you get the top view in terms of, okay, show me the resources by country, by city, by location, however you want to set this up. And from here, you can actually dive into this. You get the live diagnostics right there, etc., etc. There's a whole heap of stuff you can do from here. And essentially, the sites is a combination out of networks, printers, so physical devices, printer objects, and printer queues. So in Printix, we distinguish between the printers, as in that is the device, it's this network that it belongs to, it's got that IP, it's got this unique identifier, etc., etc. That's where you get this, the QR code for secure printing later on. This is all based on the actual printer object. What is relevant to the end user, like things that happen over here, are the printer queues. And we can have multiple queues associated with a physical device, just like you know it with a print server or just a manual print setup. I can have multiple queues pointing at the same printer, running different drivers, different queue names, different presets, whatever I want to do. I can do the same in Printix. So this is our joint view. And the real smart thing about this is you can now dish out delegated administration. So if you have synchronized your groups, and let me just jump into that very quickly. If you come down to the settings menu and you go authentication, first of all, you'll see that we are currently with this tenant. We are hooked up into our own Azure AD tenant or Azure tenant. And I have already synchronized our groups, etc. So I can now utilize our Azure-based groups in Printix to determine, who gets visibility to which printer queue, and I'll jump back into the sites, who gets to administer, like there's a group, professional services, who gets to administer specific containers. So with global customers, this is definitely something that is part of the design, the architecture piece. The POC is coming up with a method of having delegated administration across your site administration team within your organization. So you can simply come into this and associate an Azure-based group of people to have admin rights only to the resources inside of these containers. So that means they can't mess up your entire organization and like go to the root and just delete everything or something. They can only mess up the Germany site, for instance. Jokes aside, so you can essentially have people have admin access only to resources they need to have. They can see the rest, but they can't change anything. So the networks is something that is absolute mandatory to get right. What we have here, when you come into a new tenant, this is basically just going to say network 1, which is the first default network that is auto-created. From there on, you will start discovering other sites by deploying Printix client onto at least one computer in those remote networks. So the concept is, I have my tenant. I start with, usually it's the IT administrator or the system architect within the business that will take a peek at the solution, say, okay, how does this work? What does it do? And you'll basically download Printix client, which is all in the software category here. We get the client, we get the MSI, you get the arguments for your endpoint manager deployment. By the way, the question mark will always take you straight into how do I actually do this? It's all completely documented. So our documentation is very complete. We have tutorial videos in between, etc. So don't hesitate to bring out the question mark. It does really help. And it'll be content aware. So it'll only talk about things that you see on screen as you move through the product. So that said, I get the Printix client downloaded. You'll see that it actually has the tenant name and the the Printix tenant ID in the file name, so please don't change it. Otherwise, when you install it, it doesn't know which tenant in the cloud to dial out to using HTTPS. Once you've done that, you will basically have Printix client installed down here in the taskbar. And then either you are on an Azure joined device, for instance, and you have single sign-on, it'll simply just sign you on. If not, on a workgroup machine or a Active Directory machine, you will have to sign in one time initially, and it's going to use a web browser to pop up that authentication dialog. Sign in with Microsoft, sign in with Google, and you're done. You can close the window, and this will populate your computer into the computer manager, and it will add you as the user into the Printix user manager. From here, you can then come into any user and say, all right, John Smith, he's going to be system manager, which means that person with their Azure or Google account, for instance, can now also sign into the Printix administrator. If I don't do that, that person is just a user, just in quotes. So that means that person doesn't get to sign into this section at all. Okay, so the networks, just to get back to that, is something that populates while you deploy Printix client to computers that happen to sit on other networks, on other subnets, VLANs, whatever it might be. It will basically then come up as being on an unknown network. I can simply show you by saying I'm going to delete this whole network here. I'm not going to move any resources out of it. So I've just deleted the guest Wi-Fi, which means that my laptop over here is now on an unknown network. That is what you would expect once you've established like a core. I've installed Printix client on my local machine. Here in my network, I've discovered some printers. When you install Printix client, by the way, on any computer, it will always scan the locally installed printer queues running WOSD or TCP IP based ports, and it will automatically populate the cloud with that. So that's the first step to a seamless migration. I'll show you what that means just in a moment. Just want to cover the basics here. So when you then extend out and say, so now let's get the guys out of Amsterdam or Stockholm on board, install Printix client onto a computer over there, it will come up here after the user has signed in, and it'll say, I'm on an unknown network. The gateway, that subnet IP address, the standard gateway IP address and the MAC address, so that router, that switch stack, giving me access to the internet is not known inside of Printix yet. Therefore, Printix won't do anything on that network, on that machine. It's just going to sit there, and it's going to basically just pop it up in here for you to then pick it up, click on it, and then just say, all right, I want to create a network. Basically, using this machine as a template, I'm going to create a network, and I'm going to call this Wi-Fi. Oh, there. I can rename that anytime. It's not really that important. It's just a label. It has no functional impact. So now I can go straight to test network and see, all right, is connectivity up? Yeah, cool. So that's fine, which means now I have used that computer to make this network, which means what I can do from here is come to the printers. Just going to take that filter away. I've already got some printers in there. But what we'll do now is we'll discover the printers on the Wi-Fi. I do have some printers over there. So when I do this and I say discover printers, I could also use a custom SNMP configuration. Maybe the customer's configured all devices using SNMP v3. We can do all that details. I'm just going to say discover the printers over there. So it's now going to find a computer running Printix client on that network, which must be my laptop, and it's going to do an SNMP broadcast over there in the Wi-Fi. Once it's done that, it's going to come up and say, yeah, I've found some printers. And because the tenant is set up in a default fashion, it will automatically create some printer queues based off of the MIP that was read from the devices. So we can filter by network, and we can say, just show me the resources from that Wi-Fi. We can see we've got this Lexmark and that HP device. Give it a moment, and the status will come up. We can see we have connectivity to the cloud. So Printix client on that computer has the connectivity to the Printix cloud, and that computer has connectivity within the network to the printer. So again, we've got some diagnostics built in. I can do the refresh thing, and then it'll come up and say, all right, there's a warning, low toner. Right? So there's some diagnostics built in straight into the interface here. So you see what's going on. And because the tenant, and let me just go over there, in the settings, this is sort of the tenant settings, the general settings. We have this create default print queue switched on. We have convert print queue switched off, which is something that I changed. The default setting is that it'll automatically convert. I've done this because I want to show you the migration on screen. So I'll stage it. So create default print queue means for these two printers here, we have now, like this is the physical device with its IP address, etc. We now have this printer queue that was automatically generated by Printix. So this is greenfield scenario. That queue wasn't installed on my laptop. There is no queue for that printer. I've simply come in and discovered it. It's read it. The machine has come back and said, yeah, I'm a Lexmark this and that. So we have created the queue, and we have, through our driver matching algorithm, suggested, okay, you might want to be using the Lexmark universal driver in that version for Win1064. The server is only there because I've got the VM in the background running server, so I can do that snapshot migration thing, which I'm going to do next. So we'll only show the operating systems in question. Why show like all the different versions if you haven't even deployed Printix client to any of those computers? Keep the interface clean. That's the credo. We do support a whole heap more, but we don't show it if you don't, use it. So I could come into this and simply click onto the driver, and I could find a different driver in our database. So we can see that these drivers with its timestamp, these were uploaded from computers in my environment. We do have a master database. If I just wipe this, it pre-populates the driver in use currently. You can see we have a whole heap more drivers out there. The ones without the timestamp are actually from our master DB, which contains around about 10,000 devices or 10,000 drivers that way. So I can change this around and push that out to all computers. We're not going to get bogged down too much on this. I just want to make clear that we have full control over the queue name, the driver in use, the presets, all of that, just like you would have if you come from a server-based or a local manually set up environment. So all of that said, I can see the list of computers, which is none, that printer is installed on. So let's just do this. Let's just say, all right, I want to add this printer queue automatically, just as it is, as a starting point. So because this printer itself is on the Wi-Fi network, and my computer, the only one on the Wi-Fi is my laptop, it's only going to concern this machine. So when I come back into the printers, or I could even go into the print queue overview, and again, I can filter and say, just show me the queues for the Wi-Fi. I can now drill into this. I get a top view, first glance, like how are these queues configured? Okay, this one is active. It is highlighted to automatically deploy. I could automatically remove it, etc., etc. I can batch configure this as well for a whole heap of different queues by site, for instance. But I can also see that this queue is installed on one computer now. So if I click on this, it is now installed on my laptop. So if I were to go to the laptop and share my screen, go to Word, hit Control-P, I can now print to that printer using the Lexmark driver. It's like, it's done. So now let's go one step further. That's a question that usually comes like, okay, now you've got that printer discovered on that Wi-Fi. What about if I wanted to access that printer, even though I'm not on the Wi-Fi? A resource, a printer in the Berlin office needs to be accessed by someone out of the Stockholm office, whatever it might be. For us, it's just different networks, and we are bridging these using the cloud. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to say, make this printer queue available via the cloud, which means don't just show it and make it accessible and auto install it based on the network, so only for the Wi-Fi, but make it globally visible and install it for any computer on the tenant that is running Printix client. So you can see, there it is. The computer was added. I have the printer queue here. For me as the end user, this is simply just a direct printer. I can go Control P. I go to my settings in here. I can select the driver. I could even go down to my good old, come right there, preferences. You'll see, here's the Lexmark driver. I can do all the fancy business I want to do, anything the device supports. Hit print. I'm not going to do it now. And in that case, what's going to happen is Printix is going to realize, oh, wait a minute. You are now trying to access a printer over here in that other network that is completely firewalled from a computer over there. So my computer can't actually talk to that printer at all. It is firewalled. And therefore, Printix is going to encrypt that print job. It's going to transfer it through the Printix cloud. If you don't define it otherwise, it's by default going to use the Printix cloud, encrypted with AES standard 256-bit key length. And it's going to go through that as a pass-through. And it's going to hit the laptop over there. Printix client on the laptop is going to receive it and say, oh, cool, there's a print job. I need to decrypt it and forward it to that Lexmark such and such device. And there you go. You have now basically printed cross-location without the VPN, without anything, just Printix client on both ends. Which brings me to a real important fact. If you want to send a document to a printer, we need to have at least one computer running Printix client on a network that can reach that printer based on IP. That is just something that never goes away. And if you think about it, it's obvious. We can't just through thin air have the document transported to the printer. We need to have that agent, which is Printix client, on the other end, receiving it and then forwarding it to the printer. So that is really something to bear in mind. For this thing to work, Printix client and someone having signed into it is just mandatory. There are different flavors of how you can build all of this. I could also go into, just to show you this, and you see me do this quite frequently. I'll navigate through finding topics in the manual by simply going into that section of the product myself and then saying, all right, in this case, it's the virtual adapters that I just want to highlight. So I can basically just come into this, how to set up. I'm just going to click on the link and say zero. So zero trust networking might be something that your clients are also getting into. And to make it really short, yes, we can. You can also set up Printix in a way that it'll go to that central resource and only that, let's say, cloud-based server then has access back into the locations, port isolation, all of those topics. Yes, or we can also do that. So I wanted to show you how you can migrate a print server. Before I do that, 20 minutes to go. I think we're actually quite good in the time. I have my print server already run up. What I want to show you quickly is just one thing, just to do, because I think that's important. I'm going to take this away. I'm going to go to my Windows machine inside the printers and scanners, which is already running Printix client. Yeah, we know this. I'm going to say this wasn't listed. I'm going to create a new printer. I'm going to say that's TCP IP because that goes faster. And I'm going to define that IP port. And I'm going to say that's a Lexmark. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to use this universal driver. I'm just going to set up a driver or a queue. And I'm just going to put a little flag here from Wins, just so we know. So what I'm doing now is I'm setting up this device on that computer using a specific driver. I'm not going to share it. And wow, it's become even faster. You saw that? The printer queue has just been installed here. And right away, it's in the cloud. So what I'm trying to transport here is when you bring Printix into an existing environment, and even afterwards, it will blueprint and snapshot what is happening on my local computers, on my client computers, on my server. And this is the first step I need to take if I want to come to a seamless migration scenario. So all of that said, I can now basically manage this queue right there. You can see it's not active, so that indicates, all right, this queue was discovered on a specific computer somewhere in my organization. And from here, I can now start managing it. So I can make it active. I can, scale up the deployment with that simple tick box, which means this queue will now deploy to all the computers that happen to be on the network that this printer is on. So I think it's the Printix Germany network. Yeah, the CX725, we can see that we have 3 queues now. It has just done its conversion because the conversion is set to on. And we have this queue underneath that physical printer here. And we can now do any kind of configuration moving forward using the Printix capabilities. So that is one way of getting printer queues discovered based on your current situation at the customer. Now, the next thing I want to show is, I'll go into the print queue overview and I'll find this, that queue, computers, that is the one on the server. Sorry, let me just find that. So I'm going to open the properties for this queue. I'm going to go to the computers and I see, okay, it's installed here. I'm just going to take this out. Otherwise, I'm going to, pull my own leg. I'm going to go into the computers and I'm going to say, delete it off of that computer. So you can see we can also use Printix afterwards. Once we've discovered and we've learned what's happening, we can use it to cleanse the system and consolidate. And that becomes really important if you come into an environment where you have a print server and for some reason there was no guidelines and policies safeguarding people from, just as they wish, adding more printers, just going into the Windows printers and scanners, or somehow adding more printers. Usually what we'll see is when you deploy Printix client onto the print server, we'll get all the server-based queues. Then you'll install Printix client onto the client computers. You'll define the networks by doing so. And it will basically start populating all of these queues that it's finding on all these separate client computers. And sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming because you might then end up with 5, 10, 15 queues per device. We get the question what's happening? Where's all these queues coming from? Well, dear customer, those are the queues that you are running across your environment. The nice thing about it is we can come into this and basically just cleanse the system. I can sort by printing device. So if I say, where is it? The 725, it's got the B&M. That's the Printix printer ID. It's unique. It's auto-generated. You can use it in many different ways throughout the solution. In this case, I'm using it to filter just the queues for that physical printer. I could simply come into this and just delete those out of the Printix database in the cloud. And it's going to go out and find all those computers it's currently installed on and just wipe them clean and actually get rid of the queue in the cloud too. So you are left with that one master queue that you enforce for everyone, and all the dead wood is basically cleaned out of the system. And of course, at some point, you will also switch off the print server. So now, print server. What I'll do is I'll come into my VM. So I have my 216 print server sitting over here. I have some printer queues set up and they are shared. They're running different queues, some presets, just sort of what you would find out there. I'm just going to move that out the side. So one thing I need to take care of if I want to migrate a server-based environment is I need to have Printix client installed on that server. Bear in mind, when you install Printix client into any computer, it's going to stop and then restart the spooler. So there will be a little bit of a pause in the printing services. So you might, on a high frequency server with lots of queues, and maybe the server itself isn't that performant anymore, I would tend to suggest doing this outside of peak hours. Yeah? Once you've done that, it's basically going to put that print server up on the radar for us. There it is. And if I open this up, I can see the queues that we are managing, and the queues that are the native print server-based queues where we don't change the ports. So peace of mind when you install Printix client or onto a print server, regardless of what is set in the tenant settings on the migration policy, convert print queues, even if this is ticked, it's only going to convert print queues, meaning it's going to change the port for the queue on client operating systems. It will never do it on a Windows Server operating system, because that would mean essentially as soon as you install Printix client, you're going to break your print server, the GPOs, the shared queues, it's all going to break. So we don't want to do that. Therefore, you can't break it in that fashion. So now getting back to the actual topic, I have over here the shares, PS server. This is what I'm getting. I'm just going to do a point and print installation of these queues just to try and replicate what you'd see out there with your customers. Just do this one and this one, so I can get rid of this. I would have gotten these through GPOs, or somehow I went to Active Directory and found them. I got them there now. That's the main thing. And the nice thing here is we know about these queues because we have installed Printix client onto that server, which means we now know about the queue based on the queue name. And what I can do now is I can say, all right, now, so far I've done the first step of that migration, right? I've got these printers discovered. I put it on the server. We now know about the queues, the queue names, the drivers, all of that stuff. Great. And what we can do now is we can essentially do it by network or for the entire tenant, however you want to do it. Of course, it's only going to affect computers running Printix client in the first place. So another way you can stage this in terms of a POC, etc. I can come into the Printix Germany network, which is hosting these printers, and I can override this migration policy based on that network. So if I say yes, I've now said for the computers running Printix client on that network, go out and find queues. If you can match them, if you find that shared queue like these in this case, and to speed things up for this demo, I'm just simply going to come into my task manager in the services and restart the Printix service. Usually I'd reboot the box. I wouldn't really do this on the fly in the first place. It's just to speed up things. So it's now going to have a look and say, all right, I see these queues over here. Conversion is switched on for my network. Okay, cool. These queues belong to a printer that is on the same network as I am with my computer. Great. Let's convert. And that's what you'll see any second soon. It's going to stop and start the Windows print spooler, and it's going to do its thing. And the real nice thing about this is the end user experience, if you want to even call it that, is there's no change. The only thing that's going to happen is this on PS server is going to go away. I'm going to have the same queue name. I'm going to have the same driver. I'm going to have the same presets. Everything's going to stay the same. You can see it right there on screen. That's the migration, the final step, the second part of the migration happening in front of your eyes. And I can now essentially have a lift and shift scenario within, well, literally minutes. Which means it's still doing its thing. It's going to clean up, and I can now come into my application, and I still get my Lexmark, Sowieso, my sales, my marketing, whatever it might be. Printer queue, and the printer driver UI looks the same. Everything is like familiar, and we're done. There you go. Bang. Now the ASD and the BNM is put into the queue name because it's a tenant setting. I can come into the settings and say, no, I don't want to have that thing in there. You'll see it's going to just take it away. Now from an end user point, I go to Word, I go to whatever. I mean, I don't even have to do it. You get the picture. I got those printer queues there. It's the same as it was before. I can print. The difference now is these queues here are not talking through the print server anymore. They are talking to our local service, Printix service, and it is then talking to the device using port 9100 or LPR or IPP, IPPS, whatever you define. So I'm putting so much emphasis on this part because once you've established this core baseline of, we are now managing the queues, now we can talk about, okay, you want to do secure printing. Okay, let's do this. I will simply come into, like, first of all, one more thing I want to point out is the Printix client also gives me that opportunity to self-service install queues. Of course, only the way we have defined them and made them accessible in the administration. I can lock it down by groups, etc. That all has direct impact into the interface. We have a full user manual, so we have an administration manual, we have a user manual to give you, the view from both sides. And I now have that queue installed, under own steam, so to speak. Again, I have full control of the administration. I could rename the queue on the fly. Let's just do that. Have we already done that? So that's the PSO 6. No, queues. It's the 460 DN. I'm going to say this is the POC queue. So please don't rename in the midst of, doing a migration, because it does a mapping based on queue name. But you can see, we have full control right there in real time, essentially. So now secure printing. I could also come into this and say I want to do, ask me which print method I want to be doing before every print, which means I can decide if it then goes straight to the printer and just prints out, or if it goes into our secure print workflow. The way we've done this, and this is a whole nother topic that, I'm trying to cram in here. I'm just going to give you a teaser on how this works. Again, simplicity rules. We have basically taken the authentication process of me as the user telling the print management solution, Printix, which printer I'm in front of. We've taken that process out of the box, outside of the box. So we don't need to, it's not mandatory to deploy some sort of app or Java client, all that, to the actual printer. We can do it super lightweight. And the way we do it is, let me just jump into the tenant settings, go to secure print. I could also switch off the entire secure print feature and just use Printix as a pure infrastructure tool, just to get rid of the print server and replicate those functionalities, and that's it, to the first stage. But I can also say everyone has to print securely. I can even lock it down by Azure Group and say only the guys out of HR and finance, they have to print securely. They have to walk up to the device. They have to scan the QR code. Otherwise, the document's not going to come out. So also, of course, preventing, other eyes seeing confidential data, but at the same time saving cost in actual print, because after 24 hours, if I don't go to the device and pick it up, that document is disregarded. Yeah, I can change this up to 7 days. I can also take away, while we're here, the capability of an end user being able to find and add printers themselves, by just unticking this. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want to print something, and I'm going to print it to that printer. I don't really care. Bang. So I have now enforced secure printing on a tenant-wide level. For me as the end user, I'm still using this local direct IP print, essentially that, direct printer driver with all its capabilities, but the printer hasn't done anything. So the idea is, and I am conscious of time, I'll have to close on this almost, I guess. I'm going to go ahead and show you my phone, which is already running Printix app. Again, Printix, all the software is inside here. You can MDM manage it, etc., etc. It's all inside here. You would basically have Printix app on your phone or on users' phones. And I have the Printix app sitting down here. If I open it the very first time, I will have to authenticate using my Microsoft user in this case, because this tenant is hooked up with our Azure AD. You can see I'm signed in as with tenant such and such. And here is my print job. Here is my print job. That's one I sent 21 hours ago. This print job is actually not on the phone. When I have enforced secure printing, that document goes to that user's hard drive. and it sits there encrypted for the 24 hours, which is the default setting, until I actually walk up to the device and then authenticate and release it. And the way I do this is each printer has its own unique ID badge. You can use mail merge to batch configure this and completely change the layout and the information on the label. You would print this on some Avery tech form or some adhesive, stick it onto the device. And the idea is, me as the user, I go to my application, I print. And then when I get off my chair and I walk over to that device, I can now scan the code basically and tell Printix to send the document to the printer while I'm in front of it. So this is, I'm just going to show you based on this document, and I do this. I can now say scan the code. I haven't enforced scanning the code at this point. So I just chose to read the code, and you can hear my printer maybe. It is simply sending a release command through the Printix cloud to my computer saying, hey, Damien is in front of this Lexmark device now. He wants that document, release it. And from there, it again becomes a local direct IP print. That document hasn't gone through the cloud. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing, 2 minutes to go, I'm just going to print the label using the so-called Printix Anywhere queue. The Printix Anywhere queue is, to make it short, it's a PDF printer. So it'll work on any device. And this is the real benefit of it. I could now print to the Printix Anywhere printer, even if I'm down on the train or somewhere. And then when I'm back at work, I can now walk up to any of the devices that is managed by Printix, select maybe both, and then I can say scan, and then just scan the code off of the device I happen to stand in front of. You can see we have multiple queues set up for this device. So I can now choose a queue to release to, and it is now sending those documents to the printer. So the documents are following me around the organization. So I know this is like really tight in terms of time. Q&A, 1 minute is a bit crammed. I hope this gave you, a good starting point and idea on how this thing works, what it can do. It can do a lot more, but this is like the core which we'd like to transport.
Thank you very much, Damien. I think this was a really good webinar, and you make it look so easy, and yeah, exactly, and I think more or less everyone here are looking into starting with Printix. I hope so, anyway, because it's a really nice solution.
Thank you.
Yeah. We don't have any questions at all, so I think you might have been perfectly clear. But I think both me and Karina will talk to all of the people in here, and then we can get back to you if they have any issues.
Absolutely. We have professional services. That's me.
Yeah.
We have, we'll help you with the statement of work for larger engagements, coming up with the right architecture, the right way to implement, trial, POC. Like, we're here for you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Damien. I think, do anything else, or should we wrap this up?
Not from my side. I think it's just then going into the overflow bucket from here.
Good.
I think the main points have been transported, and anything else we'll take case by case.
Yeah, good. And for everyone in here, the Printix products are available in Marketplace. So please go in and add the NFR to really try it out. And check out the prices. You have really nice prices too. So thank you, Damien. Thank you, Craig, and all of the others in the webinars. Okay, bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Okay, bye.